month 7 and officially halfway through the 12 and 12 project. And I wanted to make a car because I'd been looking at a lot of Crazy Taxi and things like that, so I lent into it. And you know, this time attack mode where you're trying to pass through checkpoints and things like that. You go from point A to point B, you get a bit more time, your score goes up, and you know, make it drift, because why not? Drifting is cool. Once again, a lot of mass, but in a different sort of sense than what was used in Plunder here. I was working a lot more with making the car sort of feel like it would actually slide out, but not too slippery like you're on ice so you could just spin in spot. I had to tweak that sort of equation very, very finely to get the right amount of pull. After I sort of had the car, this is where the biggest technical challenge of the project actually really happened. I'd done work in using randomized lists, but sort of actually getting it to pick the next checkpoint and go through the whole list iterating, I had to very much refer to what Lachlan had done with Game Dev, the card game, and Lachlan helped me a bit to get this idea and concept through, so thank you very much, Lachlan. The original map of this game, here's the fun fact for this one, it was originally one of those play mats that we have as a kid, because, you know, I just wanted something and I just drew over the top of that map for the roads. Yeah, and it was fun. The other fun fact here is, despite looking 3D, this game is actually technically 2D. So the map, rather than being horizontal, it's actually vertical. Because I decided I wanted to do 2D controls rather than 3D, and it made sense at the time, but man, would I change this detail, because, oh boy, so many issues were caused by this fact of we were vertical rather than horizontal in 2D axis movement. It was such a mistake. So the things that went wrong here, immediately, because we're on vertical, I wanted to use a sign machine, or cine machine, however it's actually said, to lock behind the camera and give it some nice drift, but because it was, again, vertical, the camera flipped and went all weird and things like that. I'm sure I could have actually solved it if I had a little bit more time. I didn't. Like I said, these were made in a month. They were more proof of concepts, demos, anything like that. So the camera felt really, really rigid. To the point of, I think it affected gameplay in a bad way, which sucks. But I know now. One of the things that I would also have loved to add it into this project was sort of a directional indicator arrow on which way you actually need to travel, because a couple times people got lost. Wait, are those even still patented? Let me check. No, okay, they expired 2018. Sure. So I wouldn't have been sued by Sega, at least. Overall, I think Asphalt Overdrive, probably the least successful experiment in the list. It did come up with some good things for me to learn, such as using sound triggers. There was things like when you're actually accelerating and drifting, tire squealing and the engine pitching up, which I learned how to actually do, and I didn't know how to do that before, so that was cool to learn how to do that. But, you know, just, I would have loved to slap myself and say, no, make this horizontally using 3D controls, not 2D controls, because, oh boy. But, I mean, more I know, the more I learn. Looking back, it's funny. So, month 8, Neon Inferno is what we're talking about now. So, this one was actually one of my uni segment games, which meant, hey, I didn't have to balance making a game a month and uni work together. They were the same thing for once, which was great. I needed to make a single screen game. I wanted to interpret that how I wanted, and because I hadn't done it yet, I made a bullet hell. You know, it was a genre that I hadn't really worked with and seemed interesting enough. Because this was uni assessment, I had to do a bit more research into it than just making the game, like some of the other projects, and sort of working out what's the main elements of bullet hell. And, you know, here's the conclusion I came to, and that is readability and predictability. Those two things are key in bullet hells. You want the player to associate X with Y. My enemies were designed to shoot certain ways depending on the shape of the enemy. And predictability, well, you want people to know where the bullets are going. And again, my bullet had a couple revisions. And originally it was just sort of a red sphere, but eventually it did turn into these arrows that, depending on if they traveled cardinal or orthogonal, I think that's the correct word, diagonally, they would be red or orange. This was also a game where I had a chance to mess with post-processing a lot and just sort of bloom the hell out of it, give it a lot of retro feel, retro vibes, get music that suited it quite nice. Post-processing makes this game feel incredibly different, which I knew post-processing was powerful, but I didn't realize to the extent until I saw side by side of game A, game B, being the exact same mechanically, just different post-processing. And of course, like with the previous couple of projects, maths once again came back up in how do I make this game challenging in its own way, because I didn't have time to make whole patterns. I just had a month and I'd already wasted a lot of time getting enemies moving around on the screen and spawning correctly, so I had to work out a certain formula I was going to use. So once again, identify what elements modify the difficulty of the game, and what I actually had to in my project. So what I ended up working out was bullet speed and enemy spawn rate being the chosen modifiers for me. That's what worked. And how the difficulty curve was actually going to be done, well, I used Desmos, because graphing tools are amazing. And difficulty curve achieved. Yay for maths, once again saving the games. But yeah, overall, Neon Inferno came out well. What would change? Well, post-processing probably makes sliders rather than on-offs, because definitely they were a little bit overcooked. It just lent into the charm of the game, but making some sliders so people could turn down the bloom to not the levels that I set them to would have been probably useful. And then maybe adding a high score tracker, because I didn't have that. It was just you sort of had to know you had a high score. I did try to work out the high score, but it just kept going wrong. At one point it nearly corrupted the project, and I'm like, yeah, nope, I don't know what I did, but not doing that again, revert back. If I had extra time, probably could have got it, run out of time. That's the theme for the 12 and 12. Gotta pick what you have and cull the rest. But yeah, Neon Inferno came out fairly well, and I think that's because I could focus a lot more attention onto it than splitting it like I had been for most of the other projects. Dark Woods is next up, and this one probably my most experimental game to be produced over the course of the 12 and 12. I wanted to make a game about guiding the players when they can't see. Already a hard thing to do when, players can see, learning where they need to go. But let's go back a step. What exactly is the game? Okay, well, Dark Woods was about wandering through, who would have guessed it, some dark woods. The player can only spend a certain amount of time in the dark before game over, and they need to stay near light sources. So there's some small campfires, and you can throw out these orbs of light, sort of illuminate your surroundings and work out where you're going. From a developer point of view, I wanted to include some sort of underlying logic that people could, if they paid attention, learn and pick up, and then suddenly the whole game made sense. Which I did actually come up with this sort of clue. And that was through the use of emissive materials. So emissive materials aren't affected by light levels, which means you can see them at all times. So in your darkness, you could see this little glow of red, glow of blue, glow of yellow, just all around you. And each flower I actually positioned near something of interest. So a red flower was near a lantern. Purple flowers were near stairs, and a green or yellow flower, I think, meant you were on a path towards a campfire. And there was also things like blue flowers, which meant dead ends. I think that was it. That might have been it. It was interesting to watch people sort of struggle with this game and then not be sure where they're going to go, because that was the intended effect. I think maybe one person worked out there was this oh, these flowers have something to do with something, but they couldn't quite piece together everything. They worked out one of the flowers, which was good, but not all of them. Honestly, what's lacking here was sounds. If I had a little bit more time, more sounds. Just some wind blowing through, campfire crackling, some bugs chirping, a little bit of water blowing, that type of stuff. Just adding into the ambience of you can't see, but you can hear all of this stuff until you throw out your ball and you can learn those little bits. Small things would have helped push this game just that little bit further. A space shooter. God, I forgot how bad some of these projects were named. Anyway, space shooter. Sort of my first proper toe dip into Unreal. The main learning outcome here for me was to learn more about Unreal and get a bit more comfortable with it, as I mostly am a Unity designer. And not be, 100% scared of Unreal all the time. Only a little bit of the time be scared of it. So, space shooter. It's a top-down Space Invader style shooter where things come down to the top of the screen. The project was also a good way for me to use data tables. And oh my god, data tables, similar way that scriptable objects open my eyes, data tables as well. So powerful in their very specific niche case. Data tables are so useful for this type of game where it's, couple core components and then just making different iterations of how it all goes. I did something similar with the enemies here that I did back on Neon Inferno, where enemies were color coordinated. There was green enemies that were simply just asteroids, essentially, came down to, and yellow, which could shoot back. I then used the data table to customize, okay, how long's the wave, which of the two enemies are in it, if it's both, what's the spawn pattern, where do they spawn, what's their move speed. I could customize almost anything from this table. It was great. Coming to Unreal after using Unity for so long, very strange, in that I just got used to C# and how to do things that way, and blueprints were very, very weird and alien almost, despite being the easier way to program for a designer. Something that I could have done super easy via scripting in C#, I was just struggling so much with blueprints. I got there, but it was a struggle. It was definitely a struggle. The good for this project, and that is just how flexible I made this project for myself. I could do any sort of manner of wave customization, enemy health, fire rate. Data tables were king in this case. What went wrong? Nothing super much went wrong, as I was following a tutorial for most of this month on how to actually use Unreal and make this game in particular. A lot of the I missed things when not knowing how to use Unreal is what went wrong here. And what would I do differently? UI elements. Add-IU elements is very confusing in Unreal, and it scared me because I tried to do it and it was like, you need to create the widget and then add it to viewport and remove it from viewport. It was very scary. If I would add UI elements to this game, score tracker, health tracker, wave, so many little things that would just help make this game pop. But yeah, more UI. That's what would change. Mini mobile games was, rather than a single game, actually 3 different mobile games. Why 3? Because I wanted to work on mobile games, and they were small enough that I could just sort of make 3 of them. And, ultimately, I make the rules of 12 and 12, who cares? All 3 of the games were designed to be, those pick up and play 5-minute, you're waiting at a bus stop type games. That sort of deal. So there was color sort, which would give this grid of colors to the player a proper arrangement of color patterns. Sorry, I'm brain thinking. And then, you'd hit play, it would mix it up. And you'd have to put it back into the correct way, and then it would play. So behind the scenes, what it actually was is I would pick the 4 corner colors, and then it would blend corner 1 to corner 2, corner 2 to corner 3, corner 3, corner 4, corner 4, corner 1, That's how it did it. Sort of the biggest problem here was keeping track of the cell's original positions and moving them around, and then making it count up how many moves you'd use and things like that. That was pretty easy compared to tracking cells. But yeah, a lot of interesting processes is I learned to keep up with this. Swapping the two positions of what you're dragging to where you ended to the start position. If I was to change anything here, it would be a button that shows the original state, so you can toggle between the two, or a locking system for when you put it in the correct spot, so you don't have to guess, is it correct, is it wrong. It sort of puts in locks and a little sparkle or something, feedback. That's the first game, Color Sort. Second game was Number Link, a logic puzzle. You had boxes with numbers in them, and you could create a connection from one box to another, and it would join between the two, and the numbers would go down. And when you had the correct amount of joints connecting to a box, it would turn green, and if it was too many, it would turn red. When I made this one and gave it to a few people, I sort of realized, oh yeah, okay, I need a tutorial and explaining it how this game works, because people are trying to like drag around things or drag through things rather than connecting directly. So just made a couple of levels. I think there was like 11 and like 4 tutorial levels of here's what the game is, here's the mechanic, here's the next mechanic type stuff. I think I ended up making an Excel sheet, which I then just randomized generate number, and I'd look at it and go, is this possible to solve? Yeah, okay, and then I'd make that a level. Is how I ended up doing Number Link. I think the one thing that really struggled here was player input not quite being sensitive or big enough. It was, yeah, once the tutorial issue was dealt with, people would drag or over drag and it wouldn't detect, and making more levels sort of got to a point where I would need another mechanic to keep going with development, because there were certain positions on the grid that once you learnt a number appeared there, you could just solve them super quickly, which is good, but yeah, another mechanic would have kept Number Link going. And the final for the trio of mini mobiles was Colorful. This one was just piano tiles, but colors, literally that. You would randomly pick a cell line and spawn a cube with a color that would fall down, and you had to press the matching color. You press the correct cell, your score goes up. You press the wrong cell, well, slap you over the head, you fail, game over. There was an issue that if you pressed anywhere but the correct spot, the game would also end, so I would need to make it, hey, it's only those cells is the tap position, not the whole screen, because if you're tapping on the screen, who cares? I also wish that I added a mechanic that sped up the fall speed as time went on, because I didn't do that, because I'm a big dum-dum, so the speed was always the same. Things you learn from looking back. Overall, the mini mobile trio learned a lot about mobile games and the sort of different thinking required for mobile games, and the approach of where something is done with a mouse and keyboard a certain way, well, the mobile, you need to do something very different. Overall, I was happy with the set of games that were produced. March 12th, the last project. October 2023. Gem Rush. So this one was a little bit more rush, as there was also the Melbourne International Games Week of GCAP and PAX. I still made it within the month. What is Gem Rush? Well, there was a maze that had zombies in it and gems, and you had to rush around and get the gems without getting eaten by the zombies. Once again, followed a tutorial because I didn't have as much time to work on this project. There was actually 2 different maps, and it was at a point in development where I could develop maps by drawing on 32 by 32 images, a black pixel representing a wall and a clear pixel representing the ground. So map generation actually could have happened a lot. It just only had 2 because that's all I had time for. So there was actually an issue that happened with the gems in this one originally when I was animating them, because I didn't just want them sitting there. I wanted them to, spin up and down and things like that, where I forgot to remove the transform, so they kept teleporting outside the map bounds. It was really annoying, and I couldn't solve it until like the last 24 hours before. It was very annoying. There was another bug, which I could not work out, and that was there was some slight input delay, just enough to be noticeable, which very annoying. This project, once again, could have done really well with some sounds. Time limit, PAX, Melbourne International Games Week, I had things going on. So what actually did go right with this project, it was really good using the visual effects graph, because I hadn't really messed around with that much, and I made the run particle that appears behind the player. It was really good practice for that, so dipping my toe into VFX a little bit and yeah, sort of practicing that. Yeah, this is the end of the 12 and 12 project. It was definitely a massive undertaking for me to do this, but I'm glad I did it because I learned so much. And if you've been sitting here for the rambling of this whole video, thank you very much for listening in. Yeah, all of the games that I talked about are on my itch, Camo Oz. So if anything here is interested to you, you can look at them there. But yeah, I'm glad I did it. Thank you for listening.